The ice winds of Valcor 7 howled through the canyon like the screams of dying stars. Sergeant Alara Wynn pulled her thermal cloak tighter, her breath crystallizing in the sub-zero air. The mission had gone sideways 3 days ago when the transport crashed, scattering her unit across 50 kilometers of frozen wasteland. Now she was alone, or so she thought. The sound came first as a whimper, then a series of chittering growls that made her hand instinctively reach for her plasma sidearm. She turned slowly, her boots crunching against permafrost, and found herself staring at 6 pairs of luminous golden eyes. The cubs. They were no larger than earth wolves, their bodies covered in iridescent scales that shimmered between violet and deep blue. Razor-sharp claws scraped against the ice as they approached, their movements hesitant, almost afraid. Ilara recognized them immediately from the xenobiology briefings, the young of Clan Thark, one of Valcor 7's apex predator species. Except these cubs shouldn't be here, not this far from their territorial grounds, not in the killing cold of the polar night. Easy, Ilara whispered, keeping her weapon lowered. Easy now. The largest cub, barely the size of her torso, took a tentative step forward. Its scales were dulled by frost, and she could see it trembling. They were all trembling. These weren't hunters. They were dying. Ilara's tactical mind clicked through the situation rapidly. The Thark were known for their brutal coming-of-age rituals, but this was different. This was abandonment. Someone had sent these cubs out here to die. She made her decision in seconds. Come on then, she said softly, kneeling down and opening her thermal cloak. If we're going to freeze, we might as well freeze together. The cubs hesitated only a moment before desperation overrode their instincts. They pressed against her, their cold scales feeling like sheets of ice against her armor. Ilara gasped at the contact but didn't pull away. Instead, she wrapped them all in her cloak, feeling the emergency heating elements in her suit kick into overdrive. You're lucky humans run hot, she muttered, activating her distress beacon once more. Nothing but static. The storm was blocking all signals. As the cubs began to warm, they made small chirping sounds, almost purring. Their scales gradually regained their luster, shifting from dull gray to vibrant purple-blue. The largest one looked up at her with those impossibly intelligent golden eyes, and Ilara saw something there she hadn't expected. Gratitude. Night fell like a hammer on Valcor 7. The temperature plummeted to -70 Celsius. Ilara's suit warned her repeatedly about critical heat loss, but she ignored it. The cubs had arranged themselves around her, their bodies now generating their own warmth as they recovered. They formed a living shield, their scales interlocking to create a barrier against the wind. They were protecting her now, just as she had protected them. Smart little bastards, aren't you? She whispered, running a gloved hand over the nearest cub's head. It leaned into her touch, scales vibrating with that strange purring sound. Hours passed. The storm raged. Ilara drifted in and out of consciousness, her suit's power reserves draining steadily. Through her delirium, she thought she heard voices. Deep, resonant voices that rumbled like thunder. When she opened her eyes, dawn was breaking, and she was surrounded by giants. The Thark elders stood in a semicircle around her makeshift shelter, each one nearly 3 meters tall, their adult scales gleaming like polished obsidian. Their faces were unreadable, reptilian features frozen in what might have been anger or might have been something else entirely. The largest elder stepped forward, his crest flaring in what Ilara's briefing had described as a dominance display. She tensed, ready to fight even though she knew it was hopeless. Her hand went to her sidearm, but then the cubs stirred. All 6 of them positioned themselves between her and the elders, their small bodies taut with defiance. The largest cub, the one who had approached her first, hissed at the adult's, scales bristling. The elder froze. His crest slowly lowered. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, in thickly accented standard, the elder spoke. The trial was meant to teach them strength through suffering, he said, his voice like grinding stone, to separate the worthy from the weak. You were not meant to interfere, human. Ilara forced herself to her feet, her legs shaking from exhaustion and cold. She met the elder's gaze without flinching. Where I come from, she said quietly. Strength isn't about who can survive alone in the cold. It's about who chooses to help when they could walk away. The elder's eyes narrowed. You speak of weakness, of softness that will kill them in the hunts to come. I speak of loyalty, Ilara countered. They protected me when they could have left. That's not weakness. That's a different kind of strength. The cubs chirped in agreement, still standing guard over the human who had saved them. The elder was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, he lowered his head, a gesture Alara recognized from her briefings as a sign of respect. The Thark have hunted these ice fields for 10,000 cycles, he said. We have survived through strength and cunning. But perhaps, he looked at the cubs, then back at Alara. Perhaps we have forgotten that survival is not the same as living. He made a sharp clicking sound, and the other elders stepped back. The cubs have chosen, he declared. They have found a different teacher, one who showed them that warmth can be shared, not hoarded, that survival is stronger when bound together. His crest flared again, but this time in what might have been approval. You have given them something we could not, human. You have given them a reason to be strong, not just to survive, but to protect. Alara felt her legs giving out, but the cubs pressed against her, holding her up. My extraction team, she started to say, is 3 valleys west, the elder interrupted. We will take you to them. It is the least we can do for the one who taught us that the old ways are not always the best ways. As they began the journey, the cubs walked beside her, their scales warm against her legs. The largest one looked up at her, and Alara could have sworn it was smiling. The elders had sent the cubs into the cold to make them hard. Instead, they had found a human who taught them that true strength comes from choosing compassion over cruelty, warmth over isolation. And in doing so, Sergeant Alara Wynn had changed an entire culture's understanding of what it meant to be strong. On the ice fields of Valcor 7, where the winds howled and the cold killed without mercy, a new tradition began that day, one where the young were not abandoned to suffer alone, but were taught that the greatest warriors are those who protect the weak, because humanity had shown them a better way.